Hi everyone, welcome back. This is week 9, so welcome to the second half of the course. Hope you've been having a good time so far. This week, the title of the topic for this week is Late Antiquity. This is a relatively new historical term. It refers to the period really from around 300 to about 500. Perhaps 200 to 500 if you stretch it. Refers to a period in between ancient history and medieval history. And basically, one of the reasons why this change is taking place is the new dynamic of Christianity. As Christianity becomes a more and more significant influence within the Roman Empire, we have the Roman Empire, which is the old world, but we also have Christianity, which is something new. And Christianity playing a political influence in society, and generally that's associated with the medieval period. And so when the two are kind of getting to know one another, there's still a Roman Empire, but Christianity has become influential enough to exercise an influence on a Mediterranean stage, on a European stage. That's called late antiquity. And our study of late antiquity really revolves around the figure of Constantine. Man who becomes an emperor, wasn't supposed to be an emperor, wasn't in Diocletian's plans to be emperor, escapes from a hostage situation in the east, flees to the west. It's a dramatic story. He makes himself emperor. He wins a famous victory at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. And he attributes this victory to, at least in part, to support from the Christian God. And for the rest of his life, he will continue to support and promote Christianity. He doesn't become a Christian himself until he dies, but he makes Christianity legal. So there are still going to be many people following traditional or even newer pagan practices within the Roman Empire. But Constantine issues the Edict of Milan. He makes Christianity legal. Constantine finds himself frustrated by Rome. So he's won the civil war that occurs after Diocletian's death. He's become the unchallenged emperor. But he feels that the elites in Rome are not willing to support him in promoting Christianity, are not willing necessarily to support his political ambitions, and he sees that Rome has become strategically irrelevant. It's away from the front lines of the fighting. It's not defensible. But also that politically and economically it's far less significant than it had been in centuries past. And so he decides to relocate the capital to the east, the part of the empire, as you remember from Diocletian. It's the wealthiest, it has the biggest armies, it's the most politically stable, it has the most defensible frontiers. And so Constantine relocates capital of the empire and builds a new capital on the edge of the Black Sea, the city of Constantinople. One of the most defensive, one of the most naturally defensive locations in all of Europe and the Middle East. And the building of Constantinople is another sign of late antiquity. The Roman Empire is no longer based in Rome, it's based in Eastern Europe. And these are the ways in which Constantine is kind of filling out Diocletian's reforms. Diocletian's political reforms, Constantine uses them to enable himself to rule the empire by himself. Religious reforms, he understands, or at least the situation is developed further so that unlike Diocletian, he embraces Christianity in the hopes that it will become a unifying force within the society. It does, but not initially. And largely, he removes a lot of gold from the traditional pagan temples and religious sects in Rome, and he uses this money to complete Diocletian's economic reforms and refinancing of the empire. So it's in this way that Constantine's support of Christianity coincides very nicely and very conveniently with completing the reforms and strengthening the empire in the way Diocletian had done. Now, I said that Christianity doesn't provide unity for the Roman Empire initially. And that's true. And part of the reason for that is that although Constantine probably hoped Christianity might provide more religious unity for the empire, there are challenges for the Christian population. It's very easy to be persecuted and to stick together because you all believe that this man, Jesus, is truly the Messiah and the Son of God. When you're not being persecuted, you have to explain these beliefs. You have to work out a unified system of belief, or a more unified system of belief. That can be very challenging. And this is the situation we see with the Christian church in the early 4th century. How are they going to define their teachings using the Greek philosophical language, which after Hellenism is accepted as the way you explain teachings, the way you explain arguments by this point? So how are they going to follow Greek philosophical terminology? How are they going to explain Christianity using Greek philosophical terminology? How are they going to deal with the fallout from the religious persecutions of the Romans? These two challenges are at the heart of the struggle that Christianity faces during the late antique period. Dealing with the fallout, this refers to the fallout from the persecution of the Romans, the years of persecution. This refers to the heresy of Donatism, what's known as the Donatist heresy. That those who have in some way made concessions to the Romans when they were being persecuted. When Diocletian was persecuting the Christians, these people agreed to make pagan sacrifices to the gods, or they agreed to turn over Christian books to be burned. And now, once the persecution has ended, these people want to come back into the church, want to be received back into the good graces of the church. And the Donatists say, no, you're not Christian anymore. You have to be rebaptized. If you're a priest, the rituals, sacrifices, the sacraments that you perform don't exercise any power. And it's seen as very important for Constantine, who's trying to maintain unity, and for the Christian hierarchy to condemn this heresy, which they do with Constantine's support. It's significant to note that Constantine's support, the support of the emperor, his political power, is very necessary for them, is an important influence in condemning Donatism at the Council of Arles. And they say it's important to acknowledge that all people commit sins and can be forgiven by the church. They don't have to be rebaptized again. It is possible to be forgiven when you do something wrong. Second challenge is explaining the truths of Christianity, or the doctrines and the teachings of Christianity, using Greek philosophical terminology. And this challenge deals, at least first of all, with what's known as the Arian heresy. So Jesus said he was fully God, but he also referred to his Father in heaven. Question for Christians is, and this is a complex discussion with a lot of difficult terms to keep track of. The question is, what is Jesus' relationship to God the Father? It's for Christians. It's understood that they're distinct, but it's also important to assert that Jesus is really God. And so a man named Arius in Egypt starts to assert that Jesus is a different substance to God the Father. This is a problem for the party that becomes known as Catholic Christians, because that seems to be suggesting that Jesus isn't really God. So he's not really God and really man anymore, according to them, if you listen to Arius. He's just kind of a superhuman. And this conflict between the Catholic Christians and the Arians goes on. It becomes increasingly disruptive, and eventually Constantine decides they need another council. And so they call another council of the church, the Council of Nicaea, where they decide to condemn Arius and to assert that Christ is consubstantial with the Father. Jesus is of the same substance as God the Father. Even though they are different persons, they are made out of the same substance. They are both God. Interestingly enough, there's something of a backlash after the council. Constantine dies. His successor, Constantius, is very sympathetic to the Arians, and he says, I'm not going to say that Jesus isn't God. Jesus is God, but I don't like this term consubstantial. It suggests that there is only one person, but we want to argue for this idea of the Trinity, that there are three persons in one God. And so Constantius, even after this council of the church, continues to condemn Catholic Christians who want to stick by this term consubstantial, who want to emphasize that Jesus is of the same substance as God the Father. And Constantius is very successful at promoting Arianism. When he dies, however, it's a very interesting twist in the story. He's succeeded by his cousin Julian. Julian wants to return the empire to paganism. And he might have been successful, but he dies very early on in his reign. Nevertheless, what he does achieve, not intentionally, is he tries to confuse the Christian church in order to discredit it, in order that he can turn the Roman Empire back towards paganism. And so he permits Catholic Christians to promote their ideas again. And this part of the church that had almost been wiped out by Constantius promoting Arianism is therefore able to survive. But you can see how these conflicts, which oftentimes get very violent, that occur within the church after Constantine, mean that there's a lot of religious division and confusion in this society, even though just being a Christian doesn't mean that you're persecuted anymore. Okay. As I say, I know that's confusing. Try and follow along as best you can. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be back in just a few seconds with another video about the fall of the Roman Empire in the West. See you soon.